You know, when we talk about the ecological crisis, we're usually told the answer is to consume less, or maybe invent some better technology. But what if the problem is way, way deeper than that? Today, we're diving into a really thought-provoking book, Murray Bookchin's The Ecology of Freedom. His whole argument is that our environmental problems don't just come from what we do, but from the very way we've structured our societies.
So, to really get our heads around this, here's the roadmap. First, we'll see how Bookchin totally reframes the ecological crisis as a social one. Then, we'll dig into the history of what he calls the legacy of domination. After that, we're going to challenge some common ideas about nature itself, explore a kind of forgotten history of freedom, and finally, see what his vision for a truly ecological society actually looks like. All right, so we all know the signs, right? Climate change, pollution, deforestation. The usual response is to look for a quick fix, a new law, a new machine. But Bookchin wants us to just stop and ask if we're even asking the right questions in the first place. He thinks we need to look under the hood to find the real source of the problem.
And this is the central puzzle he starts with. I mean, think about it. We have never known more about our planet. We've got satellites, supercomputers, brilliant scientists. And yet the big fundamental problems are actually getting worse. For Bookchin, this isn't just a simple policy failure. It's a huge red flag that we've completely misdiagnosed the issue. We're busy treating the symptoms while the disease is just getting stronger.
And here it is. This is probably the single most important idea in the entire book. Bookchin's radical claim is that this whole idea of conquering nature didn't just pop into our heads. It's a projection. It's what happens when you build a society on the domination of human by human, whether that's men over women, old over young, or one group over another. The ecological crisis, he says, is born from our social crisis.
And what's wild is how early he was on this. Bookchin was writing about this connection way back in 1952, long before the first Earth Day was even a thing. He saw that the way a society is structured on the inside, its power dynamics, its ethics, is basically the blueprint for how it's going to treat the world around it.
So to really dig into this connection, he developed this whole framework called social ecology. It's basically a way of thinking that says you can't separate environmental problems from social problems. They are two sides of the very same coin, and you can't solve one without fixing the other.
Okay, so if the real problem is social domination, that leads to a huge question, right? Where did that even come from? Have we always been like this, building societies on control? Bookchin's answer is a firm no. And to understand why, we've got to go back and look at what he calls the legacy of domination.
Bookchin's answer here really pushes back against the usual suspects. He says the problem isn't technology, and it's not some fixed, greedy human nature. I mean, blaming human nature is kind of a cop-out, right? It just means the problem can't be fixed. Instead, he points the finger at something we actually created, something with a history, the structure of hierarchy.
Now, this is super important. When Bookchin says hierarchy, he means something way bigger than just, the org chart at your job. He's talking about a deep cultural mindset, a way of seeing the world that's been with us for thousands of years. It's that subconscious habit of ranking everything, judging people as better or worse, seeing nature as just a resource to be managed, and assuming that control and obedience are just the way things are. It's a logic that gets into everything.
So how do we get here? Well, it didn't happen overnight. Bookchin traces this long, slow process. He argues that a lot of early societies were pretty egalitarian. Sure, there were differences in status. You'd respect your elders, for example. But these weren't rigid systems of command. The first big shift, he says, came with figures like the shaman, who started to make power a profession, creating a special class of people with special knowledge. Later, that got mixed with the raw physical power of the warrior chieftain. And finally, the whole thing got locked into place and made permanent with the rise of the state.
This quote really nails that turning point. Power stops being this fluid, shared thing in the community and becomes a specialized job. It's something you have, not something the community does. In Bookchin's view, the shaman is kind of the prototype for the modern politician or CEO, a specialist in managing other people. And boom, there's the connection back to ecology. Once that logic of hierarchy, of command and control, became the main organizing principle for our society, it was only a matter of time before we started applying that exact same logic to the non-human world. We started to see nature not as a partner, but as a thing to be commanded, controlled, and dominated, just like we'd learned to do with each other.
But hang on a second. Isn't hierarchy just the law of nature? The law of the jungle? Don't we see alpha males and pecking orders everywhere? Well, Bookchin argues this is one of our biggest misunderstandings. Let's take a look at what he says about nature itself.
We've all heard this, right? The idea of a pecking order, an alpha wolf, a king of the jungle, it's baked into our culture. We just assume that nature is this ruthless pyramid of power. But Bookchin wants us to ask a tough question. Are we actually seeing nature for what it is, or are we just projecting our own social baggage onto it?
What's so amazing here is that Bookchin shows this is a textbook case of projection. He points to the actual scientist who first wrote about the pecking order in chickens. This guy then took that one observation and just ran with it, describing the whole universe as this grand system of domination, where even a river dominates a rock by wearing it down. We basically look at our own society and say, oh, look, it's nature.
And when you actually look at a real ecosystem, its operating principles are the total opposite of a hierarchy. Ecosystems thrive on complexity and diversity. Their strength comes from a web of interdependence and cooperation, not a simple pyramid of command. Hierarchies simplify and control. Ecosystems complicate and connect. They're night and day.
And here's why this matters so much. When we describe nature using the language of our own society, calling lions kings and ants slaves, we're doing something really dangerous. We're sneakily justifying our own social systems. We make things like patriarchy or class rule or exploitation seem natural, like they're just part of the deal and there's nothing we can do about it.
So if the main story of civilization is this legacy of domination, is that all there is? Has that been the only story? Bookchin says absolutely not. There's always been another current, another story, running just beneath the surface.
He calls this the legacy of freedom. It's the story of all the people and all the movements throughout history that have pushed back against hierarchy and kept the dream of a free, cooperative society alive. It's a history that official textbooks often ignore or just write off as a failure.
And this legacy is this rich, incredible hidden history. It goes from ancient religious sects that challenged authority to medieval peasant revolts demanding a fairer world. It includes groups like the English diggers, who in the 1640s occupied common land and declared it a common treasury for all the way up to the great anarchist thinkers of the 19th and 20th centuries. The one thing that ties them all together is this stubborn refusal to accept that domination is our destiny.
I love this quote. It comes from a medieval poem about a mythical place called Cocaine. And what's so radical about it is that it's a paradise here on Earth, a place of good food and pleasure and abundance. It was a direct slap in the face to the official church, which was always telling people their rewards would only come in the afterlife.
And here, the digger leader Gerard Winstanley gives this dream a powerful philosophical backbone. He's not appealing to myths, he's appealing to reason. He's arguing that the natural, original state of humanity is one where we share resources and respect each other, and that all these systems of rule and private property are artificial things that violate our basic freedom. Okay, so we have these two huge historical threads, a mainstream story of domination and this hidden story of freedom. Bookchin's goal isn't just to tell us about them. He wants to bring them together into a real vision for the future. And that brings us to his idea of an ecological society.
Now, this is really important. This is not a call to go back to the Stone Age. Bookchin is very clear that an ecological society would be something totally new. It would take the cooperative, community-focused ethics from those early societies, but it would combine them with the best things civilization has given us, like a deep respect for the individual and the idea that we're all part of one shared humanity.
This kind of society would mean a massive shift in our core values. Instead of hierarchy, we'd have interdependence. Instead of domination, complementarity, where our differences are celebrated. The constant anxiety of scarcity would be replaced with a focus on making sure everyone has enough. And most importantly, it would try to heal these huge splits in our thinking, the split between humanity and nature, and the split between the individual and the community.
To build this, he brings back a few key principles. The first one is usufruct. I know, it's a weird word, but the idea is simple. Think about a public library. The books belong to everyone. You have the right to take a book, read it, enjoy it. That's usufruct. But it's not your private property to go and sell or hoard. This idea applies that same logic to the things we need to live, replacing private ownership with shared stewardship.
The second principle is complementarity, which he calls the equality of unequals. I think that's beautiful. Our society tends to rank differences. Stronger is better than weaker. Richer is better than poor. Complementarity sees our differences as a source of strength. Just like a forest is healthier with tons of different plants and animals, a human community is stronger when everyone's unique talents and views are valued.
And the third principle is the irreducible minimum. This is the absolute guarantee that every single person in the community gets their basic needs met: food, shelter, healthcare. It's not something you have to earn, it's your birthright as a human being. It creates a foundation of security and dignity that lets real freedom actually grow.
So here's the big leap. Bookchin's vision isn't about going back to live in small, isolated tribes. He says that the great moral breakthrough of civilization is the idea of a universal humanity. So our task now is to take those intimate, caring ethics that used to exist at the village level and scale them up to include everyone on the planet. All right, this brings us to our final stop, and it's Bookchin's most philosophical and maybe his most challenging idea. What is our ultimate place in the world? What does it even mean to be human in an ecological society?
To explain how we think now, Bookchin uses this powerful myth of the Norse god Odin. Odin sacrifices one of his eyes to drink from a magic fountain and gain wisdom. The wisdom he gets is incredible. It's the power of control and prediction. But the price he pays is that his vision is now forever one-sided. For Bookchin, this is a perfect metaphor for modern science and reason. It's incredibly powerful, but it's blind to ethics, to wholeness, to its own consequences.
So the challenge isn't to get rid of science or reason. It's to open the other eye. It's about developing a more complete, more holistic kind of consciousness that brings our technical knowledge together with ethical wisdom. In this new vision, humanity's job isn't to be the boss of nature. Our role is to be nature's voice, its conscience. We are the part of nature that evolved this unique ability to reflect, to create, and to make moral choices. We are, in his amazing phrase, nature rendered self-conscious.
And this reveals this deep, powerful optimism at the heart of Bookchin's work. His critique of our past isn't a call for despair, just the opposite. He believes that for the first time ever, we actually have the technology and the knowledge to move beyond scarcity and domination for good. We have the potential to create a society that is more communal and more individual, more free and more ecological than any that has ever existed.
And so, we end with the massive question that Bookchin's entire work just puts right in front of us. For decades, the environmental movement has focused on changing our relationship with nature. But if Bookchin is right, we've been starting at the wrong end of the problem. If how we treat nature is just a symptom of how we treat each other, then maybe the most powerful ecological action we can take is to first change our society. Thanks for joining us for this explainer.